What's going on, guys? I'm John Hasselbauer, golf writer for thelines.com, and in this video, we'll be going through the 2023 Farmers Insurance Open at Torrey Pines. Also in this video, we'll take a look back at the American Express last week, as well as just all of the need-to-know information on Torrey Pines, course stats, betting history, and then model information that I use to inform my outright bets. Before we get into it, make sure that you are subscribed to the Lines YouTube channel and that you are in the Lines Discord, which has a link in the description. So to kick it off, looking back at the American Express, Jon Rahm is coming off of another dominant performance. He's won 4 of his last 6 events, I believe, between the PGA Tour and DP World Tour. He's not the world number one, but definitely playing like somebody who is the best golfer in the world right now. I think that's kind of out of question. I think going into that event, there was concerns about a dominance as a ball striker, and he had been leaning on the putter a little bit more at Century Tournament of Champions and the European events. Not so much the case at the Stadium course. He kind of flipped that upside down. He actually won despite losing strokes putting, which is a concern for everybody else at the Farmers this week, because he's just showing that he's just clicking in all 4 facets. The betting odds now reflect that this week, where it's just the shortest that we've seen in the post Tiger Woods era of around 4-1 or less odds to win this week. So he is a force to be reckoned with. The American Express is known to be an event with more randomness, where somebody like a Davis Thompson could have a spike career week and win. Unfortunately for him, he ran into the buzzsaw that is the hottest player in the world. So tough loss for Davis Thompson. I think he really showed a lot of resolve out there. Not a lot of people were on him. He was 350-1, and he did kind of suit that trend of just out of nowhere spike putting, make a bunch of eagles out of nowhere. Who can explain why this guy is playing so well type of week. But it was Jon Rahm in the end, odds-on favorite, who came out on top. Not a great betting week for me on the card, which kind of to be expected at the American Express. Just what you're kind of getting into. It's hard to predict course rotation, and just kind of anybody can get hot on a birdie fest. So not our best week. I would say Taylor Montgomery is probably my biggest regret, not getting more exposure to him. He lives in Las Vegas, knows desert golf, knows how to win a putting contest for sure. Another guy who just refuses to finish outside the top 20 and could be a popular bet this week, but certainly, an ideal course fit for him in a birdie fest in dome golf desert conditions. Last week, kind of kicking myself for not putting a top 20 on him. I would say that's probably my only regret of last week. But in any case, we move on to the Farmers Insurance Open. We're going from the easiest setup on the PGA Tour and PGA West to one of the more difficult non-major conditions. The winning score here would look a lot more difficult if not for the presence of the North Course at Torrey Pines. But we'll get into the specs of each and what matters. So at the Farmers Insurance Open, it's always been at Torrey Pines in San Diego. It's most known for the South Course, which has hosted the 2021 U.S. Open. U.S. Opens before that, Tiger Woods' famous playoff win over Rocco Mediate has been here. Plenty of history. Fun course to watch on TV with the backdrop. Not the most compelling architectural setup on the PGA Tour. The challenge of each hole is, can you hit it far and straight? And even for those who hit it straight, you're probably going to find the rough anyway, because the fairways are some of the most narrow on the PGA Tour. So when we're dealing with a lot of long approaches from the rough, that means low greens regulation percentage, which means a higher emphasis on scrambling. And then with Torrey Pines, we are playing on POA greens, which means a lot of missed putts from inside 5 feet. So when you're looking at a type of player at the Farmers Insurance Open, you see a lot more repeatability at the top of the leaderboard of players who've contended in majors, but also players who are familiar with California POA greens. It's kind of one of those surfaces where you either get it or you don't. There's a lot of players that just refuse to play the California swing because they just can't figure out POA greens. Kevin Kisner is one who's just come out and said, like, I'll never play the Farmers Insurance Open because I'm not long enough and I hate POA. So to each their own. You can all write your own schedule. The ones who are here, who think they're up to the test are, hopefully confident on POA greens. And when I was looking at putting my card together, I definitely wanted to see proven performance on POA specifically, but also just the West Coast California events, because again, POA greens are an acquired taste, and it's very different from your smooth Bermuda or bent grass setups. So looking more closely at Torrey Pines South, it is over 7,700 yards. It is the longest course on the rotation of the PGA Tour schedule. And the only course we've seen longer than this, even with majors included, would be the U.S. Open version of Torrey Pines in 2021 and Kiawah Island, which is host of the PGA Championship that Phil won in 2021. Greens on the South course are POA. Greens on the North course are bent. The North course is about 500 yards shorter than the South course. It will be played in rotation Wednesday and Thursday. So crucial, you only get one round on the North course. Crucial that you go low there. If you don't shoot in the 60s on that par 72, you probably can't win. It's just so hard to score on the South course. You need to, I would say at least 4, maybe 5 under as a baseline, what you need to do on the North course, or else you need to go crazy low on the South. So definitely some live betting opportunities here. If you're somebody who went nuclear on the North course, you actually have a pretty good chance from there on out to just kind of shoot around level par and find yourself in contention. So I'm not much of a live better, but definitely a viable strategy this week. Outside of the course length, again, the rough is thick here. It's overseeded rye. And they've gotten a lot of rain this week, something that we'll talk about in the narratives all week. Is it's always favored distance, but with extra soft and wet conditions, you'll get less carry out, you'll get less roll. As soon as the ball hits the rough, it's going to catch it. So advantage to bombers, advantage to players with longer carry distance. Even at the U.S. Open, for example, they really ran these fairways hot. If you were like an Abraham Answer or a Russell Henley, for example, and you just hit the center of the fairway, it was going to go, and you weren't actually going to sacrifice that much distance to the field. Extremely different conditions here, much softer, much wetter. They're actually probably going to get a little bit of rain in the tournament week as well. So you really do need to have distance. It's going to be a popular narrative, especially for DFS, maybe more of a difficult decision on, do you go chalk and load up on bombers, or do you try to go contrarian? But from a betting standpoint, I definitely want only exposure to players who have elite distance. And then with that also just, great touch around the greens. You're going to be hitting a lot of soft chip shots from thick rough. And so a proven history, especially with around the green at Torrey Pines, it's very different from some of the birdie fests and fall swing events that we've seen more recently. So just something to keep in mind. If short game is a weakness in your game, this is probably not the course for you. There's definitely exceptions. Victor Hovland's played well here. He contended the year that Patrick Reed won. But in general, if you're looking for an ideal player profile, it's distance off the tee, good long iron proximity, 175 plus or 200 plus, great touch around the green, both scrambling and strokes gained around the green, and then POA putting. Pretty straightforward. I think everybody's kind of caught the gist of that when betting Torrey Pines, but with the conditions being soft, it's just extra important that you have that distance. And a quick look at betting trends over the years. Is definitely an event that the favorites have flocked to the top of. Luke List is definitely more of an exception to the rule, but if you look at the rest of the the rest of the leaderboard last year, beyond Luke List, who won in a playoff over Will Zalatoris, you also had Dustin Johnson, Justin Rose, Jason Day up there, who were all 30-1 or shorter. John Rahm was finishing top 3 there. 1 stroke off the lead. So it's definitely a setup that's going to favor, just like a major would, players with the most complete all-around games, and especially those with extra driving distance. And we've seen the winning score here is usually around minus 15. It's been in that range the last 3 years. I would expect a similar winning score this time around. And yeah, I think, probably a median score around -3, -4. the North Course really inflates that. So if the cut line here every year is about 2 under par, you got to understand that everybody on the North Course is probably averaging 2 or 3 strokes under par. So on average, people are shooting pretty much even on the South Course. If you can go low on the South Course, which is asking a lot, you can really position yourself well to contend at this event. So then moving on to the model for this week, the stats that matter most at Torrey Pines, I will sort of pull up my screen, which is going to show the model ranks of everything that I fed in, and then where the players that I'm going to be betting outright rank in this. At the Amex, I bet 10 players because it was a birdie fest that we expected a little bit of randomness at. At this event, I'm limiting it to 4 players so that I get exposure to some elite skill sets, players with that combination of driving distance and short game. So as you can see here, I'm putting the most weight on comp courses. I think that's crucial here because not only are you getting major championship venues that play longer and thicker penal rough, like Bethpage Black, like Quail Hollow, for example, you're also getting difficult conditions that might not have been played for well over a year, but are more comparable to what we're going to see this week than the wide open Sanderson Farms layouts, things of that nature that really aren't applicable here. So something like a Bay Hill, really relevant to what we're going to see here. Genesis, really relevant to what we're going to see here. But even though it's over a year away, I'd much rather look at how players performed on that than how they're doing in this sort of birdie fest stretch of the swing season. Next, stroke gain approach, always important. Stroke gain around the green, I usually don't put a high weight on that, but I'm putting 10% here, understanding that you're going to have to scramble at a high volume. I also have 5% scrambling gain, so 15% in total on short game. I think that's huge here. Comp conditions, very similar to comp courses, but this is something in Fantasy National that I fed in. Difficult scoring conditions and thick rough and courses over 7,400 yards. So not exactly all comp courses. There's a little bit of discrepancy there, but I think that's important. Can you contend on a layout that's going to ask you to hit a ton of drivers and hit a bunch of approaches from thick rough? It's a very different challenge than what we're used to seeing with some of these more Bermuda birdie fests. Then driving distance is not the end-all be-all. I want to see you be above average in driving distance, but if you're below average in driving distance, you're going to be in trouble this week. Proximity 200 plus. Anytime we're on a 7,700 yard course, that's going to be important. Par fours, 450 to 500. A little bit of a flawed stat, but there is definitely a concentration of holes in that range. I believe there's 7 holes over 450 yards this week. So potential value to find there on players who excel from that range. POA putting, again, that's going to be primarily in events played in California too. There is some misleading POA stats if you look at like the Travelers that has POA, but it's not West Coast, so it reacts very differently than what we're going to see this week. The Genesis is probably the best comp in terms of one-to-one putting difficulty to Torrey Pines, but you can also look at Pebble Beach. And the Fortinet Championship has West Coast POA. And then lastly, just a couple more like recent form stats, first gain tee to green, and course history at this event. So I put a lot of different weights in this model. It's not usually this many inputs, but all of these have proven to be very, very relevant to predicting success. And I think the models for a course this extreme with this much of an emphasis on distance and short game tend to be a little bit more predictive. So definitely a week that I wanted to trust what the model is spitting out. And with that, just looking into the bets that I'm placing this week. Number 1 in my model is Xander Schauffele. I did think about betting him at a similar number here to Tony Finau at 15-1, which existed for a very short period of time. I'm a little concerned about Xander's history still. I mean, he wasn't able to take a full swing in Century Tournament of Champions. We're not that far removed from it. And yes, he had an incredible Sunday at the Amex. I just feel like if that albatross finds the water, 5 yards short, instead of going in the hole, then Xander's probably 20-1 this week, and we're probably still wondering if he's 100% healthy. So I think that albatross at one shot really inflated, the market on Xander Schauffele. If he's 100% healthy, I probably would be giving him more of a look. But on a 7,700 yard course, this is not the best environment for somebody with an ailing back. So I'm going to take my chances and instead pivot to Tony Finau, who has, outside of Jon Rahm, probably the most decorated history at the Farmers Insurance Open in this field. He did miss the cut last year, but before that it was T2, T6, T13, and T6. His worst finish over, I believe, 7 starts before the miscut last year was T24. So he loves this course. It makes sense. He's a bomber. He does well in major conditions. You can see he's top 5 in both comp courses and comp conditions. He's above average in driving distance. And we know Tony is somebody who kind of dials it back unless he needs to, but his ball speed is up there with anybody on the tour. So he ranks 37th in driving distance. He could easily be top 10 any given week if he wants to. 6 is scrambling game. I love that. And number 1 strokes gained tee to green. To build on that, he's not only number 1 in ball striking, but he's number 3 in short game, which is a crazy turnaround for somebody like Tony Finau, who used to be a sort of ball striking specialist that could never hit a putt. He's never been in form like this before. He's won, I believe 3 of his last 7 starts. If it was not for Jon Rahm, we'd be talking about Tony Finau being the hottest player on earth right now. So his last win came at the Houston Open, difficult conditions, less rough, but still encouraging to just further illustrate how well he does when the conditions get tough. I'm optimistic that he'll get the putter going this week. Historically, even when he hasn't been the best putter, he has putted well on POA at Torrey Pines. Next is Max Homa. This is a player I wrote a lot about in my tournament preview, which you can see in the link in the description. Homa always plays well in California. Over his last 12 starts in California POA events, he's finished top 20 11 times, including 3 wins over that span, twice at the Fortinet and once at the Genesis. I think the Genesis is a great comp this week. Still emphasizes driving distance, but also short game and putting on POA. He does all those things great. He's familiar with California. Rates out really well, long iron proximity, scrambling, driving distance, and comp courses, all the things that I find really important this week. When you look at the metrics across the board in the model, there's really not any glaring weakness in his game. Looked good at the Century Tournament of Champions, and it's a Ryder Cup year. So I think he's somebody who should be on the team right now, but might feel as though he has a little bit extra to prove, especially going, toe to toe with Jon Rahm, who's the expected favorite. I think he's going to be motivated to put on a good showing in front of his hometown. And then Kurt Kitayama is my next bet, 100-1 odds. Not an event that you want to go too crazy with long shots like we had last year. Luke List won at about 80-1 last year, so it's not to say that you can't win if you are a long shot. But if you are a long shot, you better be elite in driving distance, off the tee, and scrambling, and that is exactly what Kurt Kitayama does best. He's top 30 in distance. He's top 5 in scrambling, top 30 in strokes gained off the tee. We know he's going to get himself in position to reach all these par 5s and take advantage of the long par 4s. You can see he's top 25 in par 4, 450 to 500. So really like the profile fit. He's played himself up to top 50 in the world. Might have a reputation as someone who can't really close the door with I believe 4 or 5 top 3 finishes last season. But he has won twice on the DP World Tour, so he knows how to get it done. I think he's a trendy pick for a rising star to come this year and play himself maybe even into the top 30, get to Eastlake. But it's courses like this that we should see him play his best. And then for similar reasons, Taylor Pendrith is my last bet. Also 100-1, also a bomber. He's 4th in the field in driving distance. We know he can hit it a mile, and he has played well in conditions like these. He's top 16 in comp course history in his debut at the Farmers Open last year. He finished T16. So love that as a first introduction to the course that he was able to kind of capitalize early. Now he kind of knows the course a little bit better. So potentially, plays it a little differently and finishes, in the top 10 this time around. He's number 1 in strokes gained off the tee. He's number 6 in par 5 scoring. There are 4 par 5s here, and it's difficult to score, so you have to capitalize on the par 5s. I love that he's elite in that metric. Did kind of get his introduction into high stakes play at the President's Cup this year on Quail Hollow. So he knows how to get around in high pressure, long course environments. And he's 100 to 1. I expected him to open closer to like 60, 65. So I think 100 is a good number. If you can get anything over 80, I like the play. Around the green is probably the only thing to be concerned about with Taylor Pendrith, but in his past 2 appearances at Torrey Pines at both the Farmers Open and the U.S. Open, he was positive around the green. So although it's been a little bit of a struggle recently, it does seem like he has the game to kind of contend in difficult conditions like this. So tight card, just 4 outrights for me. It's a tight week as well. So you can find my final betting card later today or Tuesday evening. Again, that'll be on thelines.com, and there is a link in the description of this video for where you can find all of my articles for this week. That's going to wrap it up. Good luck to all of you on your Farmers Open bets. Hope we hit a winner.